I'm a microscopist. I've been one for many, many years. I've worked for all the big microscopy companies. I've done research and published extensively in microscopy. I served as president of the Southern California Society for Microscopy for several years, and I'm still on the board. I serve as treasurer now. I think I've been on the board for 18 years. And so in my duties as a microscopist, I would call on the local universities, and California State University Northridge, or CSUN, was one of them. And when I went in one day, they said, you know, we have an open position for a microscopist. Do you know electron microscopy? Well, of course I do. I did electron microscopy in my master's thesis, which was in parasitology, and I had to use electron microscopes to look at the parasites. So I have a lot of experience in all forms of microscopy. And they said, great, why don't you apply? So I applied to California State University Northridge Biology Department for the position. And I was interviewed. They called me in for an interview and they said, bring examples of your publications, which I did. And I interviewed and I thought, you know, I'm probably not going to get this job anyway, so I'm just going to give full, total disclosure here. And so I told them I'm a Christian. I'm a published creationist. I have publication in creationist journals, not just in secular journals. And in fact, there is a critique of some of my work on the CSUN website. Well, we don't care about that. We care about your expertise in microscopy. And I got my master's degree at the Institute for Creation Research when it was down in San Diego before they closed it down and moved to Dallas. And like I say, I did my master's work in parasitology. And it's really interesting because during the lawsuit, in one of the depositions where we questioned people under oath, my supervisor was asked, well, what struck you most about Mark's resume and his experience? And they said, his master's degree. And I was at the Institute for Creation Research, clearly a creationist organization. So I thought that was really funny. But anyway, I got the job. And I started January of 2010. And my job was to move all the electron microscopes that the biology department had in different places and other microscopes into the brand new, I think, $50 million Chaparral Hall. And it was the top floor laboratory with about 7, it was a suite of laboratories. So there was a big door on the front with a key code. You had to know the key code to get in, and very few of us knew the key code. So I had to move everything up there, get it installed, get it running. I had to comply with all the local and campus requirements for electricity, for magnetism, for water, for X-ray production. I had to build a dark room. And so I got everything running. That was the first part of my job. Second part of my job was to start training people on all this equipment. In the meantime, as I was installing it, the university was receiving grants from the Keck Foundation and from the National Institutes of Health to purchase a brand new $350,000 plus, because we added more equipment to it, confocal microscope, which is different from electron microscopes. It's a fluorescent microscope, but very sophisticated. You can look at living tissue in real time. You look at proteins actually moving in real time with this really cool microscope. And so I was sent to Pennsylvania for a week-long training for course number 1. They wanted to send me back for course number 2. So I became a guru, the expert, on all these microscopes in the laboratory. Now, in the summer of 2012, I went on a dinosaur dig. And we found the Triceratops horn. I brought it back to the lab and I examined it. By the way, I have my own electron microscope lab, which is actually better than the CSUN lab was. So I pretty much used my own microscopes to do the work. And I got a journal cover published, a picture on the journal. And everybody knew it in the department. They lauded me. Attaboy, Mark, good job, doing a great job. You're teaching everybody, doing a great job. In fact, they kept saying, your lab is booming, and this is a problem because we have so many people that need to be trained, and it's booming, and you're only here 2 days a week, and we need you all week long. Would you please consider coming for a week, every week? We want you full time, basically, is what they were saying. And I couldn't. I had other obligations that I had to meet, and so I was only there 2 20-hour days. I'm sorry, 2 10-hour days. That would be a long week. 2 10-hour days, and but my lab was bottlenecked. We couldn't get enough people in there, so everybody started complaining. We can't get into Mark's lab. We need to get into Mark's lab. We need the training. So I suggested to the university that we make a series of training videos. And so they sat me down, much like we are here, only I was in front of the microscope, and I did 12 hours of training, which is on their website to this day. They're still using it to train students, even though I was thrown out. Getting to the lawsuit. Everybody knew about my work. One student in particular was really excited about my work. And he was in my lab. We had finished training. He was asking me all these questions. Show me the cells. I want to see the cells. Where did they come from? What bone? Where did you find it? What does this mean? And I said, well, I don't think they're old. I think they have to be young. I mean, look at the cells. And so he was all excited. So he put all his books in his book bag and said, I got to go, and he took off. 15 minutes later, his supervisor, Professor Ernie Kwok, came to the outside of my lab because he didn't have the key. He couldn't get in. And he was banging on the outside door. So I thought, there's a fire in the building or something. I went to open the door. He brushes in past me. And he turns around and he goes, we're not going to tolerate your religion in this department. We're not going to tolerate your little creationist projects either, or your religion. This is a science department. We do science here. Well, I kept my cool. And I looked at him and I said, Ernie, what is unscientific about soft tissue and dinosaur bone? In other words, what's religious about that? And he didn't have an answer. But he kept going on, this is a science department. And I said, well, I think you just violated my civil rights. I think you just discriminated against my religion and my free speech. And he was taken aback by that. And he said, well, we should have this conversation in front of your supervisor. And I said, yeah, great, let's do. And he stormed out. Well, I emailed my supervisor immediately and told him what happened. And not long after that, my supervisor came in. He put his arm around me. He said, Mark, you're doing a great job. Don't stop doing what you're doing. You're doing your job. You're doing it well. And frankly, Mark, I don't care if you're a druid, because I don't really care about your religion, because you're doing your job. I thought, well, okay. Don't worry about this. This will blow over. This is nothing. Okay, fine. But I had already put it in writing, a complaint in writing to him. The chair of the department came up and put his arm around me. He said, Mark, this is nothing. Let it blow over. Nothing's going to happen. Now, unbeknownst to me, there were emails flying back and forth between these people saying, I think I just violated the law, and I think I just got the department in trouble, and I think I just got myself in trouble, and I'm freaked out because Mark was talking about his civil rights and his freedoms and how I violated those, and I hope this doesn't come back to hurt the department, and other emails that we found out later. So I let it go, and I continued to do my job. However, I did one thing which in retrospect I think was pretty smart. I asked for letters of recommendation from the chair and others in the department. I got fabulous letters of recommendation. In fact, the chair, Dr. Cohen, who had been in the department 20, 30 years, said, Mark is the best staff member in the history of the department. I felt really good about that. Why? Because I was trying to do my job, do it well, own my craft, teach as well as I could. And I'll tell you, we had some students. I had one student who took my training and then went to Caltech to collaborate with the laboratory there. She was offered a job on the spot. Back to the lawsuit. Time went by. And as I mentioned, I landed a journal cover with a picture of the dinosaur tissue that showed that it was cut with a knife and not sawed down. And so that told everybody immediately, this is soft tissue. How can you cut this tissue with a knife and get beautiful cells like this if they're not soft? And so everybody knew about the work. Then in about September, October, Dr. Oppenheimer, who is an editor on a journal called Acta Histochemica, a journal that's been around for 60 years or longer, very well-respected journal. He kept sending me papers from PhDs saying, would you review this? Would you review and edit this? And would you look at their pictures? And they were all microscopy papers. And I said, sure. And so I did that for him. Great job, Mark, great job. And then finally he said, what have you got? Have you got a paper that you'd like to submit? Yes, I do. So I wrote up a paper on the soft dinosaur tissues that we found. And bear in mind, this is the significant part of my work. All of the other workers who went out to look for soft tissues looked for long bones, femurs. Why? Because they're massive and they're highly encapsulated. What does that mean? They're like big concrete tombs, uncracked, unbroken. And any soft tissue would be found deep inside where they're highly protected from the environment and from microbes and bacteria and insects and from degradation. What we found was a Triceratops horn that was ripped away from the skull. It actually even had a piece of the skull attached to it. And then it was buried large and up. So the point was pointing down. And so it was pointing up. It was about 2 feet from the surface in Montana. So bacteria, microbes, insects, rodents, plant roots, fungal bodies. This thing was packed with everything. In fact, when we first took it out of the ground, we wrap it in burlap and make a cast like you put on your arm. We cast it, then you roll it over. When we rolled it over, it just fractured into a bunch of different pieces, and I thought, we're not going to find anything here. Why? Because I'd been reading the papers and the literature, and it was saying long bones, long bones, long bones. That's the key. We never found a long bone. We found the horn. What I found in that horn, besides the DNA of 30 organisms, we did a DNA analysis and found the DNA of 30 organisms living in that environment. I found stretchy, fibrillar tissue. Now, most people don't understand what that is. When bones make bone, they lay down a carpet of collagen. Collagen is kind of a connective tissue. And they lay down, these are the cells. The cells lay down a carpet of collagen, and then they go lay themselves down on the collagen, and then they cement themselves in with bone. And that's how bone is made. And so I found bone that had yet not been hardened with bone mineral. It was in the process. And they were large sheets. And this is unheard of to find something like this. And they were loaded with these cells, these osteocytes that I told you about. And so the work is significant. And so Dr. Oppenheimer asked for a paper. I submitted the paper in late December. In fact, people said, Christmas is here. Don't do it now. No, I'm going to do it now. So I did. It was accepted within 30 days. Now that's unheard of. There were not even hardly any revisions that they requested. So I made the revisions, and by January 30th, the paper was accepted for publication, and it was published on February the 12th, either 12th or the 13th. I'm missing that date right now. But it was published online. 2 weeks after my paper was published, I was terminated. Now, in that 2 weeks, some very interesting things happened. My boss, my supervisor, came into my lab, my former supervisor actually, because Dr. Kwok had become my supervisor. My former supervisor came in and he said, "There's a witch hunt going on after you right now. What have you done?" And I said, "Well, I can't think of anything other than the paper. The paper was published online. It was about to come out in the print journal, and I couldn't figure out what I'd done wrong." And I said, "Bill, I think it's the paper." Okay, I got to figure this out. So he left, comes back again. "Would you please resign?" Why would I resign, Bill? I love my job. I'm having the time of my life. You know, I'm making a good income for the 2 days I'm here. You guys are paying me a lot of money to be here 2 days a week. Plus I get the CalPERS full boat, retirement package and all the benefits. I was part-time, but I was not temporary. And we discussed that in my interview. I was not temporary. They told me, "You are permanent part-time." And so, why am I going to give all this up, Bill? And then he comes back in and he goes, I don't think I can save you. I see what's going on in this department, and you're going to be history. And so I left for that week. He came back the next week, and Bill came in. He said, "You need to organize the lab, and I need lists of, what still needs to be done, what students you have, what projects they're doing." And these are master's students who were doing their master's theses. And when they shut down my lab, they threw away all the work that some of these master's students had done. That's callous. So I prepared all these lists, and he said, "You're going to receive your termination letter tomorrow." And sure enough, my termination letter came, and 2 weeks later, I was gone. And so I thought and prayed. I thought, "Lord, should I fight this?" Because they clearly discriminated against me. Ernie Kwok clearly discriminated against me. In the 6 months after he came into my lab, he became my supervisor. And he would call me into meetings and berate me and push me around and tell me, "You answer to me, you answer to me." So I thought, well, what's the Christian thing to do? And then I thought, you know what? There's a lot of people out there who are beaten down in their jobs. They're beaten down by evolution. They're beaten down by the discrimination against their religion. And I need to stand up for those people if it's God's will. And so from beginning to end, it's always been about the Lord. It's about encouraging others. It's been about standing up for His Word. And so I found some attorneys, and I started working with them, and they quit. In fact, Jay Sekulow turned this lawsuit down, and many others did. So I found a group of attorneys and worked with them for a while, and they quit. And I found another group of attorneys and worked with them for a while, and they quit. I went through 7 attorneys before, almost 3 years later, 2.5 years, I finally found Church State Counsel, which was willing to work this case. And we only had about 6 months, 5 months to pull this off. So we moved heaven and earth to do this lawsuit. But it was discouraging. And I kept praying, "Lord, your will be done. Your will be done. This is about you." This case has never been about Mark Armitage. In fact, this case has never been about dinosaurs. That's just the vehicle that we're riding in to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ. If dinosaurs have soft tissue in them, and everywhere we look there's soft tissue, then something is wrong with the belief system that says the world is billions of years old, God doesn't exist, His word is meaningless, Jesus is not coming back. How many people are beaten down by this message every day? And so that's the importance of this case. It's to magnify God's word, to show God's word is true. You can believe it. You can trust it. You can put your trust in the book of Genesis and in the book of Acts and in all the letters from Paul that tell us that Jesus is real. All those red letters in the gospel, you can trust those because those come from the creator of the universe who died for me, and He left His fingerprint on the earth. And so it's about the gospel. This whole lawsuit was about the gospel. The university was not cooperative. There's a point in a lawsuit where you do discovery. You give them everything you have, they give you everything they have. They deposed me. They deposed me for a whole day. I sat under bright lights being questioned by a not too friendly guy. One of my favorite part during that deposition is when he said to me, because I was schooling him on science, and he said to me, "I'm not a complete idiot, you know." That to me is fascinating, that a $600 an hour attorney would be upset by a little technician and tell him, "I'm not a complete idiot, you know." Fascinating. But they weren't giving us all their disclosure. And we actually had to go to the judge and say, "Judge, come on." And we had a week before the time their disclosure was supposed to end. When they finally gave us everything, they dumped something like 13, 14, 15,000 pages on us a week to 10 days before we began depositions of their people. I was reading 3,000 pages a night to go through this. But the stuff we turned up, the smoking guns that we found that proved them to be liars, in fact, a couple of them perjured themselves to the judge in writing. And so it came down to the judge ruling on a motion that they made before the judge. Judge, just throw this case out. They have no proof of this, no proof of that. And I'll discuss that a little more in detail later. But the judge ruled and said, "Nope, you're wrong. They produced the facts. And so these are facts. And if you go to trial, and I'm about to force you to go to trial, and not a judge trial, a jury trial. We demanded a jury trial. If you go to trial, the beginning of the trial will be, ladies and gentlemen, here are the undisputable facts in this case. Bing, 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 all against the university." So they knew they couldn't win. And so they came to the mediation table in court. We spent a whole day in the courtroom, and they fought us and fought us and fought us and fought us. We made a demand. They would not meet the demand. And at the end of the day, they were shouting at us across the courtroom with the judge right there. I was mystified. And so we left with no agreement. And we told them, "Look, we're going to trial, and we're going to bring in this other law firm that already beat you once, high-powered law firm, and our demand is off the table, and sky high is the number." So finally, after a couple of weeks, they caved in and they met our demand.